My son fought his bully after his chest surgery. Life throws challenges at you that you never expect, especially when you're a parent. But one challenge I never saw coming was watching my son battle something he couldn't control, his own body. My son was born with a condition called Pectus Excavatum. For those unfamiliar, it means his chest was sunken in, like someone had taken a deep bowl and pressed it into his chest. Sounds harmless enough until you learn that, for him, it was more than just a cosmetic issue. His condition was so severe that his sternum was only 2.5 inches from his spine. 2.5 inches. Imagine that. His heart and lungs were being pressed on, bruised by the weight of his own body. It wasn't just a matter of breathing heavily after a sprint. He was always in pain, even when doing everyday things that we take for granted. It broke my heart as his father, watching him go through this. In December, the doctors finally scheduled surgery to correct it. They inserted 2 nickel bars into his chest, hoping to reshape his rib cage and give his organs the space they needed to function properly. It was a long, tough surgery, one of those moments where time seems to stretch on endlessly in the waiting room. I remember the doctor coming out, telling us it went well, but that recovery was going to be a long road, and boy, was it ever. But that's when the first twist came. Just 3 weeks after that surgery, when his body was still healing, still adjusting to those bars, a kid, one of his friends no less, punched him while they were messing around. It wasn't a malicious act. Kids do stupid things sometimes, right? But this wasn't just any stupid thing. That punch dislodged the top bar from his chest. I remember getting the call from the doctor telling us that he needed another surgery to fix what had happened. Another surgery. He was in so much pain, both physically and mentally. It was hard to see him like that. But here's the thing about my son. He's tougher than I ever gave him credit for. After that second surgery, he kept fighting through the pain. He never complained, not once. He just wanted to heal, to get back to being a normal kid, whatever normal meant at that point. Fast forward to a few months later, and his doctor finally cleared him for most activities. No skateboarding, no bike riding, sure. But he could start hanging out with friends again, lifting his backpack without us hovering over him, and even playing some light sports, as long as they weren't contact heavy. For the first time in months, it felt like there was light at the end of the tunnel. That night, something happened that shook me. My son came into my room, this strange, determined look on his face. He sat down on the edge of the bed, and after a moment of silence, he said, "Dad, I'm cleared now." His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something I hadn't heard before. "There's this kid at school. He's been bullying me for months. He's been hitting me, and I couldn't do anything about it before because of my chest." He paused. I could see how much it weighed on him, how much he had been keeping this bottled up inside. "Can I kick his ass?" Now, let me tell you something about my son. He's not the type to fight. Sure, he's roughhoused with his brothers, but that's just sibling stuff. He's never been in a real fight in his life. But here he was, asking me for permission to throw hands with a bully. And not just any bully, someone who had tormented him, hit him, knowing full well that my son couldn't fight back because of his condition. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I stayed calm. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the situation. The fact that he had to ask me for permission because he had been so scared of getting hurt again. So I looked at him and said, "Yeah, knock the fucker out." I didn't know if he'd actually do it. I figured maybe he just needed to hear it, to feel like he had my backing. He nodded, didn't say another word, and went back to his room. The next morning, I drove him and his older brother to school like any other day. Now, his older brother, he's a tough kid. He's been through his own challenges, including a traumatic brain injury that kept him out of school for an entire year. But that's another story. Point is, they're in the same grade now, taking some of the same classes. Before they got out of the car, I pulled his brother aside and asked, "Why haven't you stepped in? Why haven't you done something about this bully?" He looked at me and said, "Dad, I wanted him to toughen up. Once he was tired of getting hit, he'd do something about it." I didn't entirely disagree with him, but still. "Handle it," I told him, "but don't get into trouble." I dropped them off and went back home to pick up my younger daughter, who goes to a different school. As I was driving her, my wife called. Have you taken XX to school yet? Well, after you do, go pick up your son. He's gotten into a fight. I immediately assumed it was my older son. I mean, he's the one who's more likely to get into trouble. But when I walked into the school office, there was my younger son, sitting there with a grin plastered on his face. He looked like the cat who'd just eaten the canary. I warned him, he said, his grin only widening as he pointed to another boy sitting across the room, clutching an ice pack to his face. I'll admit it, I was proud. He told me what happened. He walked into class, sat down, and just like every other day, the bully came up and hit him in the head. But this time, my son didn't flinch. He didn't back down. Before his older brother could even stand up to intervene, my son turned and knocked that kid out with one punch. One punch. That was all it took. The kid hit the ground bawling, and my son said it was the best day of his life. 3 days of suspension? Worth every single second. You know, this wasn't just about standing up to a bully. It was so much deeper than that. My son had spent months feeling helpless. His body had betrayed him, and then this bully had taken advantage of it. But in that one moment, when he fought back, he took control again, not just of the situation, but of himself. Since that day, something has changed in him. He used to hate school. His social anxiety made it hard for him to make friends, and the bullying didn't help. But now, he's made more friends than he knows what to do with. It's like the fight flipped a switch in him. Suddenly, he's the kid people want to hang out with, and he's disappointed that school's out for the summer. It's funny how life works sometimes. One punch, one moment, and everything's different. Edit 1. Just to clarify, the kid who dislodged my son's chest bar wasn't the bully. It was one of his friends, just clowning around. He felt awful about it, and it was never malicious. The bully, on the other hand, knew my son couldn't fight back because of his chest, and he took advantage of that. My son wasn't his only victim either. This kid had a reputation. Edit 2. Since the fight, my son's confidence has skyrocketed. He's made a ton of new friends, and his social anxiety is practically gone. He even told me how disappointed he is that school's out for summer because he actually enjoys going now. Edit 3. Thanks for the overwhelming support. I never expected this story to blow up, but I'm glad it resonated with so many of you.